Hey everyone, this is Mecha. We're gonna do a comparison between Japanese players and how they rate Fire Emblem units versus how Western audiences, English-speaking audiences, rate Fire Emblem units. What I'm here doing is we have a blog called History of the Emblem, and this one has compiled several surveys on Japanese Fire Emblem websites. Added up the ratings, give them a bit an average, and see how they rate units, and we're gonna compare it to a tier list that I have made. This is the final result of my tier list review with Jumpy, so it's based on efficiency standards. You can see Seth is right there at the top, all the Amelias and all the Namies are at the bottom. So this is how the English versions, the English-speaking players usually roughly rate units. There's some inaccuracies I'm sure that you'll disagree with, but roughly this is how we do it. And we're going to see how they roughly compare. So thanks to History of the Emblem for compiling this information. You have an FE7 version as well that I want to do at some point, but today we're going to focus on FE8 because, well, first of all, I just feel like it, and second of all, it's funny, and third of all, I'm doing an FE8 playthrough on the channel right now, so it feels very on topic to do this one first. So let's read the intro first to know roughly what we're getting into. FE8 unit rankings according to Japanese players. For those who don't know about the differences between FE8 Japanese and overseas versions, there were a number of changes in growth rates and bases for playable characters, and almost all the enemies were nerfed in overseas version of FE8. So yes, there are interesting version differences which factor into the range a little bit, which I also find interesting to, throw in here. As a result, to my great curiosity, I found that a number of Japanese players' unit rankings had significant differences from the English fandoms. This is all, of course, still very subjective, so I have taken the averages of the rankings I found on 4 fan sites. I will also be adding a summary of their commentary and notes, and will point out when a unit's growth and bases were changed. I myself played Japanese FE8 A-Frame hard mode, but on a themed run, so I haven't used all the units. If you want to see the results of my run, see this post. And note, because of differences in grading skills, there is a slight inaccuracy in my calculated average ranking. So I've put their letter grades on the side, and we'll link my sources at the bottom of this post. So if you're curious, I'm going to put the link to this blog in the description as well, so you can check that out if you happen to be fluent in Japanese. Also, if you are involved in the Japanese Fire Emblem community, please let me know in the comments down below if there's anything I missed or anything interesting to add, because I'm super curious about this. I don't get to talk to the Japanese fan base often at all. I think there's a couple people in the English community I've talked to that do speak Japanese, but that's about it. So I'm very curious about this, if this is all accurate, if there's something that we're missing here, because this is just one person, I think, compiling almost everything, and they didn't add a whole lot of editorial commentary to this. There's some, but not a lot. So I thought I would add to that with this video. So yeah, let's get started. Let's get into Erica, and then we'll go over the differences as we encounter them. I've read this all before. I actually had to re-record this all because the mic quality on the previous attempt was very bad. Anyway, let's get into Erica. So general ranking 4 out of 5, as I'm probably going to put in the thumbnail, a B, a C, and then 2A. So that averages out to about a 4 out of 5. Erica is praised for her speed and skill, which she is almost guaranteed to cap unless you get seriously unlucky with her levels. The person who gave her a C criticized her low growth in strength and defense, though amusingly her 30% defense growth actually puts her in the realm of the game's higher defense growth. Another criticism was that being sword locked limits her to 2 range chances. It limits her to range chances and thus her combat ability. Her better scores pointed out that she has better overall stat caps than Ephraim, so she would surpass him should she be lucky to hit them. So this reminds me of people doing like rating the unit threads on various forums. And they start with like the units that join first and they go on later. They start with Erica, or they start with like some kind of unit that's like not the best, but like usable. They'll be like, it's probably like a 7 out of 10, a 4 out of 5, like good enough, right? But then if you look at my tier list, I have Erica in E tier because I find that most units compare better than Erica. If she's on Erica routes, she's available a lot, but she doesn't really do a whole lot compared to units that can actually promote before the route split ends, like before the game almost ends basically. So it's kind of hard for her to stand up to someone like even like Joshua or Garrick, or let alone Cormag or Tana. And then if you are playing Ephraim route, then Erica barely exists beyond the early game. And in the early game, there's still a lot of competition for Erica that is arguably better, of course Seth being one of them. So I generally don't find Erica very good, but this ranking is like, well, Erica's a 4 out of 5, and I can see where it comes from because if you look at it less like we're comparing units and more like let's assume that all Fire Emblem units are in a class that they're trying to pass, and that the thing that they have to do to pass is be usable in the game, then yeah, most units probably go in C tier and above. They get a C grade or higher because they're viable, they're trainable, they're perfectly usable. You don't get in trouble for using, let's call it quote-unquote bad or inefficient units. Erica, too, is totally fine as a lord. She doesn't melt to everything in one hit. So what could possibly be wrong with that? So if you look at it through that lens, I think a 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 is not super bad. If you're not wondering about, like, how do I put this? Sometimes it doesn't have to be a failing student, basically. And in this case, they said, yeah, there's no failing students, or at least so far. There might be units that I have placed above Erica that they end up putting below Erica by a couple points. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, they put Erica as a 4 out of 5, which on my tiers would be like a upper C, maybe even upper B tier, depending on how you look at it. There you go. That's Erica. It's also interesting that they mention stat caps for F-frame, because that means they're referring to the late game. Erica's a unit that I personally have trouble like even getting to 2020 in the first place, and even if you do, like, all that really changes is like her speed and skill are very high, but in the late game I find that caps and secret zones barely matter because you have 30 use S-rank weapons that are effective on all enemies, so usually you're gonna one-shot or one-round KO at the very least. And so stat caps don't really change anything. Like, no one's ever complained about, say, F-frame not one-running, which is like one person with low caps in FE8. So that's why I try to put emphasis on the whole game rather than just the end game. But they're, as we'll find, pretty focused on the end game. I do find it surprising that they think sword locking limits them. I thought that was more of an, maybe not an elitist take, but something that most medium level players don't really care about. Most characters are locked to one weapon type, so why does it matter that you look to swords? Of course it matters because they can't use javelins, so it limits their 2 range chances, which I guess they value, so I found that a little bit surprising. F-frame. General ranking 4.75 out of 5. 2 A's, an S, and a B. Unsurprisingly, Ephraim still got a better score than his sister, but one site quite amusingly rated him lower than Erica. He was universally praised for being a powerhouse in strength and defense, and for having immediate 2 range as a lance user. The biggest negatives point out whether the stat caps limited his offensive ability. Again, I don't know which enemies they're putting them up against to make Ephraim's stat caps limiting him. I'm sure that if you have him try to use a javelin against a Cyclops late in the game that he won't one round, but that's like the worst thing I can find about him. But even a higher stat cap probably wouldn't do that for him, so I don't know where that limitation comes from. Of course, this is a stellar ranking. The only thing Ephraim doesn't have for most of the game is a mount. Oh. Sorry, I had to take a sip because it's really warm in here. So that is, I guess, one problem Ephraim has. Like, personally, I find it annoying about Ephraim that he doesn't promote for the longest time, so his stats are kind of C-linked. Ephraim is one of the few lords I do get to level 20 regularly because he's just so good at combat, but I can't fault everyone or anyone for giving Ephraim a near-perfect rating because he is a near-perfect unit. His stats are all around super good. You could say that his bulk isn't the best in the game, but the units that are bulkier than Ephraim are so much worse in other areas. Like, yeah, Gilliam might take hits better than Ephraim, but his offense is so much worse. So yeah, Ephraim is good. I can't really fault him for this. I would never give him like this perfect of a grade almost, but I do understand people who do. Now here's a rating that Seth. 3.25 out of 5. 2 C's and 2 B's. And here's the first growth change that we have to take a look at as well. It's very small. He has a 85% HP growth in Japanese, but it's in 9% in English. So they felt the need to buff Seth, the English version, but only by 5% HP. This is a change that I sometimes saw in like ROM hacks that were like trying to balance FE6 or FE8 or whatever. They would make these super tiny changes to growth that barely change anything. If you want to change something significant about a unit, like we'll look at Franz later, that is an example of a proper change that actually impacts something. This does absolutely nothing, so I don't think this impacts anything at all. The fact that Seth is 85% chance less, or a 1 in 20 less chance in the Japanese version level HP is not going to change anything. It's about Seth. The general commentary was that he's a Jagan with good growth. The Japanese fandom doesn't even consider the Oifi archetype. And honestly, I can't fault them for that because they've actually played with Oifi and they probably realized, even if they know about the Oifi archetype, that it doesn't really say a whole lot, and it doesn't even say a whole lot about Oifi himself from FE4. Anyway, and that he's sufficient for endgame. That's a lot. That's an understatement. His biggest criticism was that directed towards his strength and HP, and the consensus is that he shouldn't be used too much because other characters will surpass him. So again, heavy emphasis on the end game and about stealing XP is basically what they're saying. That's not in here explicitly, but they're saying he shouldn't be used too much because other characters will surpass him. So to them, the purpose of using a character is to make them good for endgame. It's not to have the best unit at any possible moment within the game, other than for endgame. So if a unit is currently good, but you can get by without them, you should use units that will grow more because they see it as an investment. And investing in Seth, well, you only get 5 XP out of killing an enemy, so why would you? The answer is Seth is really good. So if you want to make use of the good bases he has, you want to use him now, you want to use him to get him out of sticky situations. But FE8 is so easy, even for Japanese players, where the enemies are slightly stronger and a lot of units are slightly nerfed. You know, they still don't want to use Seth because they're like, well, I can get by without, but later on there might be a situation where I cannot get by without a good unit, so I want to make the most out of the XP I get, which is a mentality that has been around the Fire Emblem community forever, and one that I've gone in great detail on many Fire Emblem Pitfalls videos, and maybe even waifu videos and other stuff. And it's generally common knowledge in Fire Emblem English for community that now that if you have a unit that's good right now, you probably should use them a fair bit right now. And stealing XP is not a very good argument against a unit like Seth, because if you replace Seth with another unit that needs XP, say Ephraim or Erica, then those units will take XP away from other units too, except that you probably need more to stay viable. If you want to keep using Erica, you probably want to feed her like 4 kills per early game map or something like that. Whereas Seth, you can get by with 0 and he's fine. So yeah, then Seth holds back and people get more kills to distribute among the other units, so that team is better off. Or you can have Seth kill 4 units, it'll be the easiest 4 kills ever, so he'll make your life easier, and you can make that decision yourself as the player. Seth is not forcing you to take away XP from others, so no matter how you slice it, Seth is the winner in a comparison between him and a unit that actually needs XP. But he's also a good investment. Early game has an XP buff for bosses, at least the English version does. I don't know if the Japanese version also has this perk, but I'm assuming it does. If you kill a boss in the early game, you'll generally get 100 XP because there's a slight change in how XP is calculated for overleveled units that favors overleveled units, and Seth is very overleveled. So if you kill a boss like O'Neill or Brigitte or Bone or Bazba with Seth, he gets so much more XP than everyone else, comparatively speaking, because he basically gets like half a level or a full level from these, depending on which you kill. The Entombed in Chapter 4 will give him just a full level, which is insane. So if you're going to give a full level to someone, do you give it to Seth, who has good growth and usually gets a 6 XP per kill? Or do you give it to like Franz, who has worse growth than Seth and would get 100 XP as well, but if he could get, you know, XP uncapped, he would get like 2 levels, you know what I mean? In that sense, Seth is actually making use of XP better than other units in such a case, which is a funny edge case that I felt like talking about. So anyway, the point I'm making is that Seth is way better than a 3.25 in my opinion, but I'm not here to slander the Japanese fanbase, just to make this clear. Like, this is just the way they see things, and I can talk all day in English about how I think they're wrong, but in the end, it's just a bunch of people's opinions I disagree with. I'm not saying, oh my god, all the Japanese people are bad at Fire Emblem. I'm just saying I think that their thinking is usually in line with the Fire Emblem fandom as it was many years ago here, and we have since saying progress to make it sound like we're better, which I agree with, but they might not, and I think it's rude to imply that they're worse, so I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to say I heavily disagree. France. General ranking 3 out of 5. 2 C's, 2 B's. So that's the same rating as Seth. He, of course, like I said at the start, the ratings don't exactly align one-to-one with the tier list or with ratings out of 5. So that's why his rating is a little lower than Seth. But he's only 0.25 worse than Seth. So the entire difference between Seth and Franz in the early game, the part where Seth 1 rounds and doesn't die, and Franz doesn't 1 round and can die, that's 0.25 to them. Seth Light got an even lower ranking than Seth, even though he generally will surpass Seth if raised properly. The general criticism is that his growth are too balanced, and thus he's more of a jack of all stats that doesn't excel in any particular area. His lackluster defenses and luck also don't help his cause, and the general sentiment is that Amelia is way better. We'll see about that. We'll see about that. I mean, too balanced, I think, is not a good criticism of a unit by itself. It's possible that a unit is so balanced that they don't hit any of the benchmarks. Important benchmarks, as an example, is how much speed do you need to double. If enemies all have 7 speed and you need 11 speed to double, if Franz misses that benchmark because he has 9, then units that hit that benchmark with ease are going to be better because they double, and units that don't, but they're better at strength, so they 2-shot more easily, for example, hit another benchmark, they'll be better. I don't see any evidence here that Franz misses or hits those benchmarks in particular. I know from experience that Franz, depending on his growth, can definitely miss both benchmarks to be very bad. In fact, I have some live experience with that. And that was very RNG screwed Franz. Usually, when you use Franz in FE8 hard mode vanilla, not lunatic like I'm playing, he will hit those benchmarks eventually. But it depends a little bit on luck. Sure, it's not like Joshua where you'll always double, or Garcia will always two-shot but might not double. But I don't think Franz is necessarily worse. What I would like to put some emphasis on is the changes to his bases in Japanese. So in Japanese, the enemies are slightly stronger, but Franz also has slightly higher bases. Particularly, the important ones are 1 point more strength and speed. So no matter what benchmarks you need, Franz is closer in FE Japanese than English. Of course, again, in Japanese, the enemies are slightly stronger. So it's possible that an enemy will have slightly more speed and he won't double at all. But compared to other characters, this is a pretty significant change. He'll be like, compared to, say, Garcia, or compared to, say, I don't know, Loot or something, Franz is going to be closer to doubling than other units. So they've had a better Franz and decided he's still worse than we think he is. I have him in like the lower B, but in a casual playstyle like we're talking here, I would rate Franz a fair bit higher than some of these flyers. Like I would say he's better than Molder for most players, just because the efficiency tier list is kind of based around moving Seth around. So you have Seth all the way to the top, and then you have 3 units that can move Seth in various ways in the A tier. But the way most people play, Franz is probably a little bit better than units that can just move Seth around, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, a bit disappointing for poor old Franz, but, you know, with the way he turned out in my run, maybe this is a deserved punishment. A low rating on Japanese forums. Mod Zebra here has some comments on Emilia. The opinion on Emilia is so hilariously polar opposites between Japanese and English players. I'll have to side with the Japanese players since most English unit rankings depend on efficiency, and I don't care about efficiency. My Emilia was really, really good, completely blew her competition out of the water. I'm not going to proxy argue against the Japanese players or Mod Zebra and their Emilia opinions because I've already done that so many times, and that debate has been played out. I'm just going to say I think more things matter than just endgame performance, and if you compare Franz during Chapter 9 of Ephraim route or Erica route to Emilia, I think the comparison is pretty clear. And Emilia will grow, but the amount that she surpasses Franz by is going to be minuscule compared to how big the difference is when Emilia joins, and I think we should take that into account. That's all I'm going to try to say on this, but we'll get into Emilia eventually, so maybe I can't avoid this at all. Next is Gilliam, who got 3 Cs and 1 D for 2.5 out of 5 rating. He does have some growth changes. They're very small, but it is, I guess, significant to mention that he was buffed for the English version by 5% strength and 5% skill. So he was even worse for us than he was for them. I don't think that fully accounts for the difference in rating that they gave him, like, almost a passing grade, a 2.5 out of 5. I think usually a 3 is considered like a passing grade. But generally their opinion is very negative. But we, or I, had him at an E rank, right next to Lara Shell and Renak, all the way in E tier. His biggest criticism, according to Japanese players, is that he's only good in HP and defense and not much else. He is the only general you can get unless you decide to make Emilia a general, but with a strength growth as shaky as Erica's with far less skill, most players didn't find him a good investment. In summary, use him in the beginning and then ditch him. So a couple things stand out to me. First is that they talk about the only general you can get. In this case, they didn't, you know, be led astray by the pitfall that is class by class. I think they think of them and in terms of, okay, I have a team that I have to be balanced across the classes. I don't want to just use 8 paladins. What I want to use is I want to have someone on a horse, or I want a paladin, I want a general, I want a mage, I want a flyer, I want a healer, stuff like that. I think that's how they tend to think of this, which is true for the Japanese and English fan bases both a little bit. But I think it's more important to think of units as, you know, what can they do on the battlefield that is helpful, and their class might help or hinder that. But it's just one of their many properties you have to consider. You don't begin with the team slots divided by class. You begin with, okay, which units am I going to use, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and how do I kind of compensate for them. What weaknesses are worth dealing with, which one of them are not, which I think is a different kind of analysis. They also talk about his strength growth, but not really their bases, so this is more about, you know, growth versus bases kind of thing. Gilliam's strength is way better than Erica's. Like, he has his flaws for sure. I mean, I put him below Erica. But Erica's strength growth, I think it is also 40%, but Erica's base is like, I think it's 4 or 5, whereas Gilliam's is like 9 in the very next chapter. So I think they overemphasize the growth here a little bit, which is an actual pitfall. But yeah, other than that, I do largely agree with the texts here that they find Gilliam very unimpressive, which is why I have him in E tier and they have like passable, which again I do understand because he's not unusably bad. He is not so terrible that he gets one-rounded. He just kind of has a lot of problems. and it don't really his draws don't really compensate for his drawbacks, but he's not so terrible that you tell someone to actually ditch him. Well, they do tell you that, but he's not so bad that your playthrough is ruined if you use him, basically. And that, I think, is their hallmark, or their benchmark for actually putting it below 2. The next rating, though, will surprise you, and that is Vanessa. General ranking 2.5 out of 5, which is the same rating as Gilliam. 2 Ds, a C, and a B, which I guess, yeah, that roughly averages out to the same as the 3 Cs and the 1 D that Gilliam got. Her bases were nerfed, is how I understand correctly. She had 12 speed in Japanese, but only 11 in English, because the Japanese one is on the left, right? Yeah, that is how it is. So, I know what happened here. Let's read the text. While the English fandom's tier lists tend to rate Vanessa higher than or equal to Tana due to her earlier recruitment, Vanessa is rated quite low on Japanese tier lists. Her highest ranking only a B and then 2 Ds in other lists. She got most of the flack for her low durability and strength, with a mere 50% HP growth, 35 strength, and 20% defense growth. One ranker mentioned that the only stat Vanessa has over Tana is skill, and that Tana is the better option. We'll get into a little bit, the bottom thing a little bit. It's interesting that this mostly only mentions Tana, not even Cormac, but just Tana, which I think really emphasizes that they mostly do comparisons within a class and not a whole lot besides. There's a lot you can say about Vanessa that is a negative that I agree with. She does have a pretty rough start combat-wise. She's useful for her flyer utility, which I don't think they care too much about. But she's not super useful at combat in the chapter with mostly bandits with axes that 2-shot her, and she has shaky hit back. She's weak to archers. She has a lot of problems compared to other units that don't have these problems. And that is a fair thing to dock her rating for. I don't think I put it all the way down to 2.5, which again, equal to what they gave Gilliam, lower than Franz. But I don't know, I think Vanessa's worth it overall. And if they rate Tana quite highly, I'll just spoil that right now, like a lot higher than this. And if they think Tana's that good, I don't think they should put Vanessa like 2.5 points below. But I think they mostly do this because she is the worst of 2 options in their eyes, and that just makes her super inferior. Like, yeah, some of her growths are kind of bad, and her bases are not that super high in this too. But Tana has roughly the same problems, and a lot of units that they rate highly have the same problems, and they don't really get dock points for that. And I also wonder how they rate Florina for FE7, because Vanessa is kind of Florina but better in a lot of ways. So yeah, I don't really get the Vanessa flack. I personally think I've used to rate Vanessa like a bit too highly for casual play. Like for efficiency, I think she totally deserves an A tier that she got here, like below Seth, because of all the unique things she can do as a flyer. But for more casual players, I don't think Vanessa is that good. But I still would put her like next to Tana at the very least. There's an efficiency argument for Vanessa versus Tana that I won't get into, where the early game XP is like very competitive, but this list is not getting into that, right? This is about Vanessa's worse than Tana, so 2.5 out of 5 would not use. Also interesting is this comment by the mod. While the English fandom typically recommends Wyvern Knight promotion for both of them, the Japanese list all recommend Falcon Knights for its swords. Now, they didn't detail what exactly it is about swords that is so useful that you pass up on Wyvern Knight. I had to go Wyvern Knight for both Tana and Vanessa in my Lunatic mode playthrough because the extra attack speed you get for it is so massive. I don't remember exactly what the numbers are. I want to say Falcon Knight gets like 1 or 2 points of con and speed each for promotion. But Wyvern Knight, I think it goes from like 5 to 9, which is such a massive jump in con alone. And then you also get some speed from it. I don't even care about Pierce. I just think the speed is massive, especially when using heavier weapons like Iron Lance or Javelin. Yeah, that's too heavy for Pegasi. I think that's worth doing. And then swords, I mean, yeah, it's nice to be able to Iron Sword some bandits every now and then. But if you really need that weapon triangle advantage, you have the Actuator available, which Wyvern Knights also use better than Falcon Knights. And it gives you a double weapon triangle advantage, which is even stronger. More than makes up for losing a little bit of speed, if that even happens. So I don't know why swords are so important. Plus you get E-rank swords, like you just get dinky iron swords. There's definitely situations where that's useful. I think the main recommendation for the main draw to Falcon Knight is that you can rescue more units. But again, I don't think they really care about that kind of stuff. But the lighter con allows you to rescue more units due to higher aid, due to how the aid formula works. But again, I don't think they really care. Let's talk about Molten next. General ranking, again, 2.5 out of 5, 2 Ds and 2 Cs, but his growths are changed quite a bit in HP. This is the biggest growth change we've seen so far. 50% HP lost between, yeah, this is Japanese, this is English. I'm pretty sure, hold on. Oh, this is weird. Moifi says that his growth in English is 70% HP, which I guess they got wrong, which I also checked this on my previously recorded thing, so good thing I double checked. So I guess they got 70%, not 65, but either way, so the Japanese Molder is better and they just kind of nerfed him for some reason. While Molder is commended for his high HP growth, which was nerfed for the English release along with speed, okay, his low magic and luck received criticism. The rankers do not find him a combat viable unit as a result, and not worth grinding when Archer has the exact promotions, levels faster, and has better offensive growth. Should you use Molder, they recommend the Bishop promotion for Slayer's effective damage against monsters. I guess, yeah, Molder's not a great combat unit, but I can't help but notice that there's not a single mention of the stabs that he can use in here. That's like the main draw of Molder. He's a C rank stabs at base, and he'll probably have B by the time you have the option to use B rank stabs. You probably have A by the time you get A rank stabs. That seems more important. Well, not more important than all the other things they list necessarily, but something worth mentioning in a rating for a unit. Yeah, he's not the best combat unit, but he does have enough good combat when he promotes that he can kill enemies. At the pace that I think they're playing, they should be able to heal something with Molder almost every turn. Maybe not turn 1, but most turns. And so Molder's growth, like, it's not that slow. It's pretty slow, but when you're level 3 in Chapter 2, you have some time to get the promotion. I played Lunatic at a pretty casual pace. I ended up with like, what, level 10, level 15 Molder by the time I got to like Chapter 11, Chapter 12. And then I just promoted him and started slaying things. They probably don't like early promotion because they have a heavy emphasis on endgame. And so if you're waiting for level 20 to promote Molder, yeah, that's going to take a while. I get that. Then he's never going to promote in time. And yeah, I guess then it would be a grind. But yeah, if you're just doing that, if you just, if you only want to promote at level 20, then Archer is definitely going to reach that before Molder is. Archer does have the exact same problem with low luck. Not magic necessarily, but low luck. So I wonder if they'll bring that up. Then they'll bring it up, don't worry. And yeah, offensive growth's good, but Molder's more bulk. And he has enough offensive growth to one-round monsters with Slayer for sure. Maybe there will be some that he doesn't double, but I kind of doubt that the ones that Molder struggles to double will be doubled by Archer. Like, is he going to double the fast doggies? The mouth dogs? I don't think so. Archer's speed is not that good. So yeah, I don't really agree with the way they got here. I don't really agree with the final rating, I gotta say. I have Molder near the top. Again, for casual players, he's probably a little bit lower than that. Ross. General ranking 2.75 out of 5, so slightly above all the 3 units we just discussed, even though he starts worse than all of them. And growth changes, he is slightly worse in speed. Again, I don't think this is the cause of the difference making. I don't think this is the cause for the difference. In contrast to the general English sentiment, the Japanese players, or these Japanese players, find Ross the least usable trainee. Probably important emphasis because, again, it's only 4 Japanese websites. Maybe there's different opinions on our websites in Japanese. But they find Ross the least usable trainee. Because of his low skill, speed, and defensive growth, he's seen as a very shaky unit. I wonder if this will come up again with other trainees. His recommended class is Berserker to take advantage of his high luck and strength growth. Again, I gotta wonder if this is because of the way that they see Berserkers in general and not the units in general, that they think, okay, it's a Berserker, I expect them to have high luck and strength. So don't go Warrior, even though it would be 99% the same with the same luck and strength, but go Berserker. Maybe they think the luck is more impactful for units with shaky hits. Maybe some of them think that luck impacts crit rate, which I wouldn't blame them before, but it's not true. But that's just speculation on my part. I don't know. An interesting dichotomy. Oh wait, hold up. Matsura comment is probably important too. I didn't notice this, but apparently the trainees in Japanese version don't get an XP bonus, at least not as much as they do in the English version. That is very interesting. I didn't know that, and I forgot to read that out last time. So I guess it does make Ross worse, but it also makes Emilia and Ewan worse, which, you know, we'll get into later. So I'm guessing they gain XP slightly slower, but still faster than a unit that's like same level, but in actual tier 1, not tier 0. Interesting. I wonder how that would impact ratings. There's an interesting tangent I want to go on to about the trainees, specifically Ross and you know, the trainees. When you get Ross, most of your units, other than Seth, which they don't really want to use apparently, are not very good at combat themselves. So any kills that he gets, you can't feed to other units to make them snowball, like Vanessa, Franz, and Garcia maybe. These are units that they do not like, clearly, but it is a bit of a thing where the opportunity cost to feed Ross kills is definitely there. And so dealing with a bad unit like Ross is a bit rougher in the early game. You can still do it just fine, but compared to, say, when you get Emilia and Ewan, your units outlevel the enemies by so much by then, especially for Ewan, who is like, you're facing like level 8 or 9 enemies when your units are already promoted most of the time. So having to feed a bad unit kills at that point in the game is a lot easier because you can hold yourself back and still just kill all the enemies in your range that could pose any threat. It's much easier to deal with a worse unit. There was a debate back on the Fire Emblem Fusion days that was Wade versus Sophia in FE6. And the argument was basically that the Sophia side was making, that was Raken, by the way, from the Punich Incarnate video. And the argument for Sophia was like, well, yeah, Wade joins way back and has to stack up way more suck over the course of the game, like suck as a thing you build up as a stat, you know. Whereas when Sophia joins, she's at 0 suck, and yeah, she sucks a little bit more than Wade does. Like, she's way worse, but you have way more tools to deal with Sophia's suck. Like, your units are promoted, you can probably set up a kill for her, and if she misses, you probably have to deal the means to deal with the enemy that she missed to get rid of her, or get rid of the enemy before the enemy gets rid of Sophia. Whereas when Wade joins, you know, you have Marcus, and then you have Deke, and then everyone else does suck really hard still. Like against Chapter 4 enemies especially, they're so bad. So dealing with Wade's suck is way worse than your other units. Like, you can't really deal with Wade unexpectedly missing an enemy as well as you can deal with Sophia unexpectedly missing an enemy. So in a way, Sophia joining later and having better units around her is much better for Sophia, but also Sophia is a lot worse compared to your units around back when she joins than when Wade joins. Like, the distance between Wade and Deke is not nearly as big as the difference between Sophia and, I mean, maybe not Milady or Percival, but like, I don't know, Klein, Negren, who else is good around that time, a promoted Allen or something. Like, that distance is way bigger. So how you see that is partially tier list philosophy, which I think is interesting and fascinating. I still want to dig up that debate at some point. Actually, I made a video on that debate, I think. It was very fascinating. Long ago, though. That's what I was reminded of when I read this whole Ross entry. But yeah, largely I agree Ross is not that good, but I would not rate him higher than Mulder, Vanessa, and, well, not almost as high as Franz. Garcia has a very short ranking. General ranking 1.5 out of 5, 3 Ds, and 1 generous E. Garcia does not live up to his reputation as a former Renee general. Despite having better growth than his son's HP, strength, and skill, his even lower speed and defenses give him a lot of flack. The general impression is he's all power and not much else. I get it if you're just looking for endgame emphasis, but I think this is literally just about growths. And I think they haven't really looked at growths against bases and maybe process promotion bonuses because their speeds are roughly equal for most of the game. Garcia does eventually lose out because he only has 20% growth, so Ross's even 25 will have more at some point, but make no mistake, Garcia starts with 7 speed. Ross starts with 3, maybe 4, I don't remember, but it's less, like way less. He also gets weight down before he promotes, and he still gets weight down by hand axes when Garcia does not. So Garcia is a lot of the time fast or equally fast, but they don't care because they're just looking at growth, which I'm not a big fan of, obviously. And Garcia is a unit that does that, like, he peaks in the early game and he falls off very slowly. He's not very good in the long term, but he's not 1.5 bad. He is not. This might be the lowest rating unit on the whole list. Maybe there might be someone with like a 1.25 or something, but this is one of the lowest ratings for sure. I don't think Garcia deserves that. He's definitely passing grade. So if you're looking for units that pass the class, how viable they are, Garcia is definitely among them. So I think, beyond me disagreeing with this, I also think this is an inconsistency in their ratings. But again, this is a compilation, an average of 4 Japanese websites. It's not just one person, so you know, take it with a grain of salt. There might be other people out there who do think Garcia is good. There might be that one person on a Japanese website somewhere, the one saying, hey, actually, Fake is better than Robin. You know, that might be there. Anyway, moving on to Nami. Now, before I scroll down, what do you think Nami's rating is going to be? Just post it in the comments right now if you're watching this. What do you think it's going to be? When we have Mulder at 2.5, when we have Ross at 2.75, when we have, what's even a high rating so far? When we have Erica at 4.5, or 4 out of 5, Ephraim near perfect ranking. What is Nami going to be? The answer might shock you. It's a 4 out of 5, the same rating as Erica. An A, another A, B, and a C. And she did have a slight nerf to her HP for English version, whatever. Okay, Nami really took me by surprise. She has 2 A's and another unit recommendation list. I didn't use her also included her, so there was another thing he looked at, or they looked at. The sentiment is that while her HP and defense are shaky, her offensive and luck growths are good, and she will usually turn out to be a good unit. Furthermore, as the only unpromoted archer, she is best suited for filling the ranger niche. In the case of her C ranking, the person cited her bases as a detriment, based, and said there aren't many situations where you actually need an archer in this game, and this I think is the one person that says, hey, you know, we're looking at this class by class, but why? You know, how good is it actually to have an archer or a ranger? I will give Naomi credit over someone like Rebecca or Will that, you know, being able to get a horse and swords is better. Like, it sucks that you don't start out at like Sue or Shin, but at least you kind of turn out like them in a little bit. And she gets D swords too, not even E, which is that's kind of okay. Obviously, I disagree with the 4 out of 5. I think that's way too high, and she's ranked above units that start out way better than her and aren't necessarily all that much worse in the long term. But I will admit that Naomi does have long-term potential if you're willing to train her up. She has a fire affinity just like Rebecca, so if you support her with like Colm or Gilliam or whatever, she'll get like full avoid, crit hits, attack, depending on which support partner she takes. She does turn out like rather crit heavy and dodgy and powerful and fun and all that, but it takes more work and the reward isn't really there. Like, if Dusel 1 rounds, why would you use Nimi basically for something? But, you know, she's not absolutely completely irredeemably terrible, so with the way this list worked, I would personally give her like a 2.5 if we're just basing them on that, like see who passes the class of units. That's how I would see it. Now let's look at how they view Colm next. Colm is 3.5 out of 5, so 3 Bs and a C, and they did nerf his speed for the English version. They were like, wait, this Steve is way too fast. They just took away 2 of his speed, which is a massive change. Colm doesn't actually double some enemies, like some brigands in the early chapters. It's very embarrassing for him in English, but they have just a 12 speed thief, which is good for them. Colm is viewed as a non-combatant, especially for his poor HP, defense, and res, though some of them say he's more combat viable after leveling. I want to say, I'm not going to look him up, but I'm pretty sure Colm has like roughly the same parameters in these areas as Naomi, base Amelia, base Ewan, but okay. He gets points for his thief utility, and his only rival is Renak, who is Renak. Most of the comments are along the lines of, use him because he's not Renak. For context here, I'm just going to open this link real quick. Because Renak is heavily different between English and Japanese. There's a big difference between how good Renak is at combat in English versus Japanese, and he's not even good at combat in English, so that's why they're saying all these things. We'll get into Renak more as we'll go through the things, but just to have the context here. Renak is horribly nerfed for Japanese. He's still bad in English, but he's horrible in Japanese at combat. But yeah, there's not too much thief utility in this game, which I'm surprised I didn't mention. There's a lot of comparisons with FE6, for example, in these ratings, especially for the FE7 version, obviously. And FE6 has a lot of thief utility, like a lot of stealable items and a lot of locks to be picked, and FE8 just doesn't have that many, so I'm surprised they didn't bring that up. And instead, they'll just say, oh, you need a thief, so I just use them, I guess. Because he's not Renak, so we don't want to use Renak. Which, you know, whatever. It's a reasonable rating, I guess, for Colm. He doesn't do a whole lot. I think the way they got there is a little bit off, but other than that, I don't really hate this rating too much. Archer, there we go, 4 out of 5, and he did get some changes for the English version. He was mostly nerfed, apparently. He lost a point of magic and a point of speed, and they did the reverse Franz on him, basically. And also they nerfed his growth a little bit. They said he's too good against magic. We need to nerf his res by 5%. And also his magic by 10%, which this is actually like a slightly big deal. Archer receives praise for his all-around excellent offenses, but his low defense and luck growth are cause of concern. Going Bishop is, of course, the recommended route because of Slayer. Sure, I don't really disagree with this too much. I don't think Archer... I would put more emphasis on the fact that he dies so easily. Like, he gets 2-shot, he doesn't have reliable avoid, and he faces crit chances. I think those are big problems for him, especially in the short term. Like, trying to train him can be a bit of a pain. But if you can get Naomi a 4 out of 5, I guess you can give Archer a 4 out of 5, right? Like, they have roughly the same issues if you think about it. Neither of them can really reliably enemy phase. So, I guess, like, there's worse ratings to be fried here, so I'm not going to get over this too much. But it is funny how much they nerfed Archer for the English version. And by funny, I mean, like, damn. Maybe, yo, this is a tinfoil hat thing, but what if this is because the Mogul that he faces in the cutscene for Chapter 4 was also nerfed for the English version? They were like, well, we don't want Archer to one-round this guy without the crit. He needs the scripted crit to get out of trouble. And so they nerfed his bases to accommodate that. I hope that's not the case. That would be very, very silly. There's Archer for you. All right, loot 4.75 out of 5, 4 straight A's. Some slight growth changes, they don't really change a whole lot. Like it's 1 out of 20 level ups will be slightly better. Everyone loves loot. Despite having all A's, she only has a 4.75 average because 2 reviewers use S as their highest rank. She is universally praised for her fire power, haha, making her a great offensive and healing unit. Naturally, going Sage is the recommended route due to its higher magic cap, and meanwhile some people in the English fandom will tell you to go Mage Knight because of Horse Emblem. I resent the accusation that it's just we like horses. Let me go in depth because they go into a little bit more detail here, and I kind of want to go on this tangent for 1 second if you allow me. In Japanese FE8, I find that there's very little reason to go Mage Knight if you're concerned about stats. Yes, you get a horse, but it's only 1 extra move compared to Sage, and it locks loot to animatomes that are a disadvantage against magic using monsters. With a magic cap of 25, loot will likely struggle to one-on enemies, and loot cannot double with more powerful tomes if she gets speed screwed due to her low con. So, we can agree to disagree on the fact that one move and all the other advantages that a horse gives is worth giving up light magic. Like, I'm fine with calling a draw on that, that's okay. What I will contest is that a magic cap of 25 is not sufficient to 1 round. Like, show me the enemies that will survive loot with 25 magic, which by the way she only reaches like very late in the game, like 25 to 2010, like promoted at level 20 and then leveled up to level 5 or level 10 is when she starts to hit that cap maybe. And then in addition, they pretend that like Sage has some kind of speed advantage here because, oh, if you get speed screwed you don't double, but they have the same speed. There's no speed promotion for Sage or anything like that. But there's a con bonus, +2 con for female Mage Knight compared to female Sage. And so if you are a Mage Knight, you can use heavier tomes. And, you know, if you don't double, you know, you just hit harder with heavier tomes. And if you do double, you know, that's great because now you can double with more damage. And Excalibur is one of those heavy tomes. And if you find like the 1 or 2 enemies that deal doesn't one round with like fire with 25 magic, which I think those are very rare, I will point you to the Excalibur tome, and she does one round all of a sudden. +5 speed will help with that too. So yeah, I think Mage Knight is better, and that's not just, you know, English fandom likes horses. It's English fandom likes horses, and also Mage Knight has other advantages. But the horse is also good, I think, better than light magic. And what else is there here? Yeah. Anyway. So they like loot a lot. I think it's because she's Nino, but joins a lot earlier, so they think that's good. I do think loot is more doubling issues than she often gets talked about for, and she's a little bit hard to train up. But again, if you find Rebecca and Arthur this good, then I get that you find loot better. So at least it's consistent with the rest of their ratings. And yeah, I get the rating, I just disagree with it, that's all. Like, there's a reason I have her in E tier, but for casual players, I would put her a little bit higher. I'd give her like a, you know, a 2.5 to a 3 for a viability rating at the very least. Like, she's viable, but she does require investment, which they don't really care about too much, but I do. Natasha, 3 out of 5. 3 C's and a B. While Natasha is considered a better healer than Mulder, her shaky skill and speed are cause for concern. Furthermore, as a staff-locked character before promotion, she will gain levels much slower than the likes of Arthur, Lute, or Ewan, so her usability drops in comparison to magic attackers who gain staffs on promotion. And like Arthur and Lute, or Arthur and Mulder, Bishop is the recommended route. Don't really heavily disagree with this. I do find that Natasha does level a lot slower. Bigger issue than Mulder because her staff rank is also lower, and she joins later at a lower level, so sure. I don't know if you'll call her speed and skill shaky, but it's been a while since I've done combat Natasha, so I don't know. Sure, I'm okay with this. I do think these ratings, again, don't really mention how useful staves are in Sacred Stones, which varies heavily chapter by chapter. That's like the main draw, is having a higher staff rank than most units, but for in case of Natasha, where she competes with like an Archer that could promote and get C staves, which might be roughly what she has at that point too, it's fair slice. I don't know why she ends up with a 3 out of 5 if that's the whole concern, but, you know, sure. I'm not going to heavily disagree on Natasha. I'm not going to debate someone over freaking Natasha. Mod Zebra's comment. I'm going to skip this one because I'm not here to debate Mod Zebra, surprisingly. Joshua, 2.5, or 2 out of 5. I keep saying points. 2 Ds, a C, and another D. And his, this is his Japanese growth, so we get that shaky 30% strength growth, which we'll get into. Man, Joshua gets no love from Japanese players for his combat viability, which is a far cry from the English fandom that usually places him among the upper mid tiers. Yes, we do. He's in C, which, yeah, that's about upper mid, I guess. While people commend his skill and speed, they find his 30% strength and 20% defense res growth too shaky. He is better as a story character than a unit, was what someone had to say. I agree. Swordmaster is still his recommended promotion, though some consider him to be a better assassin than Colm should you want Silencer. I think assassin is a waste of time, and if anything, you should do it for the XP bonus, not to have a flashier crit rate or a flashier looking critical. But, you know, you can do that if you want to, I guess, if you really hate Renak and Colm. The 30% strength, I agree his strength is shaky. 35 is not that much better. I think it's always funny when people flack on a 30% strength for being unreliable, as opposed to like, I don't know, 10% or something. Like 10% is reliable because you're never gonna get strength and you're gonna like just assume you're not gonna get it. Where 30% it feels more like it's that yellow zone where you kind of want the strength, but you don't know if you're gonna get it. You know, it feels unreliable. If you rate stats on like a color spectrum, where red is really bad and green is really good, and you have that yellow in the middle, I think 30, 35, 40 is that rough part where people get like, I hope I don't get strength screwed, which I think that's statistically not really the best reason to look at, the best way to look at it, but it's how people view it. That's how people feel it. You know what I mean? It's how people feel statistics. But yeah, I don't think Joshua's super good. I'd probably rate him a little bit higher, but it's not too different from how I see him most of the time. He's fine. The speed is a little bit overkill, and you could do with more strength, but then he'd just be a mercenary, I guess. Ford. Yes. 2.5 out of 5. Better than Joshua. 2 Ds, 2 Cs, and a slight HP change that we don't really think about. Why is my nose clogged all of a sudden? Ford's rating is hampered by his low bases and his mediocre balanced growths. In summary, he is Franz but worse, and at least 2 of the ranker state don't bother with this game's red-green pair. Please do not slander Kyle in my presence, but yes, Ford is bad. Well done, Japanese players. You did it. Probably 2.5 points too high, though. Kyle, 2.75 out of 5. He's got 2 Cs, he's got a D, and he got a B. So yeah, that's about a C. Yes, that's almost exactly a C. And then again, a slight HP change, whatever. Kyle's advantage over Ford is his better strength and defense growth, though his speed, luck, and resistance leave something to be desired. His recommended promotion is Great Knights to capitalize on his defense. I think his strength and defense a little bit undersold here. Like, they're very good. They're just above average for most characters, and that's pretty nice. If you can get it to double with like a speed wings, he's fine. But sure. This, I think, is another thing of like class by class and class expectations. You don't have to be a Great Knight to take advantage of having more defense or more strength. They will be just as handy as a Paladin. The one way I could justify it, maybe, and this is me filling it in for them, this is me making assumptions, is that Paladin is more of a kind of a flunky type thing where you don't really have Kyle as a primary combat unit, but you just use him for rescue drops. Then Paladin is more useful. But if you actually want to do your playthrough, one of your goals is make Kyle good at combat, make Kyle as good as combat as he possibly can be, then yeah, I can see Great Knights because I think the promotion bonus is slightly better and axes help a lot with weapon triangle control and more damage. So in that case, yeah, Great Knight is a little better, and in that way there's more emphasis on combat. But again, the strength is still there when you're Paladin. Like, it doesn't go away or anything. Like, sure, he has lower strength as a Paladin compared to Great Knight, but it's still better strength than Ford. Better strength than Franz too, for that matter. So I don't really like that way of phrasing it, but I'm nitpicking it if I'd say it. I'm not going to say it's wrong, because that would be a nitpick to the highest degree. Overall, probably an okay rating if you don't really care about horse flunkies. Tana, though, 4.85 out of 5. We got 3 A's and an S ranking. And it's worth noting she did get nerfed or buffed for English version, depending on how you look at it. So from Japanese to English, she lost a point of strength, gained a point of skill, gained a point of speed, and lost a point of defense. So I would say they got the better Tana out of this. Like, the points of strength and defense are way more impactful than a point of skill and speed on her. With probably the highest average rank, Tana proves a favorite among Japanese and English players. Boasting relatively high HP, strength, and speed and luck growth, she can easily become an offensive powerhouse. With her speed, she will also be quite evasive, making her defense growth less of an issue. The only worry she has is archers. Going with what they've done so far, this is probably a consistent rating. They like endgame performance, and Tana's main issue is that her start isn't very good, but she grows fine, and her growths are really good, and her class is really good, and everything else, blah, blah, blah. So she's good, sure. I don't know if I'd give her this high of a rating. I'd probably put a bit more emphasis on how she's like level 4 in chapter 9 with the stats that kind of match that. Like, she does need to be fed kills quite a bit, which How are you going to do that with your... Are you going to use your 3 out of 5 Seth to do that? I don't know. Tana does need trading. Maybe to use the Tower of Volney for her. I don't know what they think about the Tower of Volney grinding. But I think Tana is like overall fine. I wouldn't rate her this highly, but with the way they've been rating this, I think this is consistent. But let's get why we're all here. Let's do Amelia. Alright, so same rating as Tana, almost like a 1/10 of a point off. 4.75 out of 5. A B, an S, and 2 A's. And then she has a slight nerf to the English version, so they have a slightly better Amelia by a whole 10% HP, 5% strength. So again, not significant, I think. Amelia's popularity as a unit in Japan came as a huge surprise, since the English version of pressure of her said she is not worth the effort. 40% growth in strength, skill, speed are potentially risky, but the Japanese players seem to find the risk worth it when she has 47 levels to grow. I don't know, these growth... I don't want to get like into statistics debates because I already know, but it's not risky to rely on the 40%. This is what I mean earlier when I said, if she had 10% strength, they wouldn't call it a risk, they just say your strength is bad, but now they're risky. I don't know, you get why I'm itching at this, right? You get why I'm itching, but this is not why we're here. 30% defense is also respectable growth. Only 6 main game units have higher defense growth. And her 50% luck growth is handy for clutch crits and dodges. Hope you're not relying on that to keep Amelia alive, by the way. The general consensus is that Paladin is her best class, A, while General can be chosen for the novelty. I think that's the best possible way to put Amelia's promotion items. Thank God. One reviewer stated that female Paladin's 23 strength cap is limiting, and those intent to do a creature campaign, it may be worthwhile to go General and abuse the boots trick in Lagdu to make her raise her move, because you can get infinite boots that way, I suppose. And then there's more stuff about Mod Zebra's Amelia, which I'm going to skip, because I'm not here to debate Mod Zebra or their experiences. So, I mean, I've said almost everything I want to say about Amelia in the past 25,000 videos I've made, but the quick recap is that Amelia starts off way worse than your other units. At the payoff, we can agree that it's slightly better than your other units at level 20, but for the most part, it's like peanuts. And the biggest advantage I found that Amelia has when I raced her in my Lunatic Mode playthrough is that her resistance is way higher than your other paladins, so she can do things like kill shamans more easily. And in my case, I mean, all my other cabs got screwed, so Amelia just ended up being the best. And I made a no personal rule to have Amelia promote through the Tower of Volney, so I didn't have to put up with her at their worst performance. But, you know, you can't look me in the eye and say, training Amelia is the easiest way to get through FE8. You can't. It's just not true, because, you know, it takes more effort. The low-brainest way to play FE8 is not training Amelia. That's all I'll say on this part. But, yeah, if you give a unit with that start, with, like, a unit at that base gets one-rounded and needs kills fed to her to, like, putting enemies down to, like, 2 HP, and then there's still a chance she misses when she attacks them. If that unit is a 4.75, how are you going to rate someone like Garcia lower? How is that fair? How is he 3 points lower? Injustice, man. Injustice. SMH. The only thing that's accurate here is that she's better than Fort Lamau. Inez, 2 out of 5, 3 Ds and a C. And he did get buffed in the English version by 3 HP, because the one stat that archers need in GBA Emblem is 3 more HP. The general verdict is Nami is better, though the person who gave him a C gave him the benefit of the doubt, saying it's possible for Nami to turn out worse. In general, he's serviceable but easily outdone. Yeah, and this is not a long-term project. He's a short-term guy. These people rate mostly based on long-term potential, and so Inez is just, okay, you can use a silver bow a couple times and then, you know, just bench him. And in that case, he's not going to do a whole lot in your playthrough, and so you're not going to be like, oh, Inez, that guy I used the whole game long. Yeah, he was really good for me. You know, they just use him a couple times, maybe in his joining chapter, and then they're just... no long-term potential there. Inez does have good growth, if I recall, but he has less levels to grow, which they find really important. And so he gets low ratings. I get it. I don't agree, but I get it. Garrick. Wow. 5 out of 5. I forgot. With an ass rating. 2 A's and 2 S's. And he did get heavier. when Garrick was shipped overseas, he gained 2 pounds of con. I was wrong about Tana. Garrick is the one with the perfect score. His good bases and offensive growth trump his shaky speed and resistance. As one person said, there's a low chance that he can go wrong. Some emphasis on bases, which I find very interesting. It's weird how they like his good bases, like good bases, low chance he's going to go wrong, because his growths are not that good. Like he's at like a 30% speed growth. But who cares, because his bases are good. I kind of don't really know why people don't apply this to other characters. They're like, wow, Garrick is good at base. Should we look at how good Nami is at base, or Amelia? They don't seem to care a whole lot. I also wonder, and this is something I'm really curious about knowing, if the Japanese player base likes to promote Garrick early, or if they keep him at a level term mercenary, because it's tempting to look at him and see like, well, he's not super high level, so I could probably train him, but he joins with that hero crest in his inventory, and his promotions are so good for him. Like, either gets a Hans with like, he gets +2 move and bows, or he gets a hero and hand axes, and people love heroes. So are they able to resist the temptation to promote him early, or are they saying, well, if I just raise him a little bit more, he can be an even stronger hero or whatever? I wonder what they're doing here. Because me personally, I just promote him early because I know I've weighed the pros and cons over many playthroughs and decided I just want to promote him early, done. That's it. Like, his growth can't give him anything that I don't have already. I just want to one-round things as a hero now. And he does one-round in vanilla. And I'm assuming for the Japanese players, he one-rounds too, even though the enemies are slightly stronger. Anyway, I'm surprised that he gets a perfect 5 out of all the people. I guess if you think about them, they just like combat, they like long-term potential. Well, Garrick is not the best long-term, but it's good enough to where he gets by with everything the game gives you. Maybe he is just good enough at base to where people are willing to accept the early promotion, and where people are willing to excuse like the low speed growth. I do wonder though. But I guess for mercs, like that's like, it's also very noticeable that Garrick is good at base because he goes up against enemies right away and one-rounds them. So he gives a good first impression that makes you want to use him more. Like for Inez, for example, he has the same thing. He one-rounds people at base, but because he's a promoted sniper, they'd call him bad if he didn't. And because he does, that's like, yeah, that's what I expect of this guy. He's a promoted sniper going up against unpromoted soldiers. Of course he's one-rounding. But Garrick, he's an unpromoted dude at level 10 one-rounding. So that just gives a better unit feel, like, impression, you know? Okay. Next up is Tethys. What do you think Tethys is going to get? What are they rating a dancer? Usually, I found that Japanese players can value dancers just fine. But what did they do with her? 3.75 out of 5. So I would usually expect like really bad or really good from dancers. This is kind of in the middle, which is strange. It's better than, again, the early game squad. Like, it's better than Seth, it's better than Franz, it's better than... It's almost as good as Erica. It's not as good as Luther or Garrick, though. The 2 C rankings cite her inability to attack and her weak defenses are as a bane. Yeah, 2 Cs and 2 A. So these two people, two websites were like, yeah, dancer good. And these two were like, dancer not so good. They cite her inability to attack and her weak defense as a bane. And meanwhile, the 2As cite her good defenses. I have the beholder, I suppose. But she's mid-tier at worst for her dancer utility. So I've done a whole video on dancers. You don't need me to reiterate why dancers are good, probably, if you're still watching at this point. What I want to get into real quick is the inability to attack and her weak defenses as a bane. I think this really shows a difference in how you look at units very well. And again, I'm not just saying that I think the way they look at it is wrong or bad, but I do really disagree with it. The way they see it is, okay, dancer is good, so that's good. That goes in the plus column. That's like, that's good. That's one good thing. But the bad thing is that she cannot attack and her defenses are weak. That's bad. So we have that's a con. So now we have a plus and a minus, and we average those out and we get a 3.75, or we get a C, or whatever. That's one way to look at it. The way I think is better to look at it is, okay, Tethys has these massive drawbacks of weak defenses and inability to attack where you have to protect her, and these massive bonuses. Can we make use of these massive bonuses without hurting ourselves so badly with her defenses? And the answer is just keep her out of range, which is, I think, easy enough to do, where the massive plus stands out way more than the weak defenses, because it's very easy to have an enemy phase where Tethys is not in range, while still making use of her dancer utility. So you can get the plus without the con most of the time, without it hurting too much. And I generally mean that I usually find that a turn where I use Tethys to my advantage is way better. Like, yeah, technically Tethys is unable to attack, but if you have Tethys dance for Seth and Seth attacks 2 enemies, Tethys added the best offensive attack to your team. Or let's say you don't like Seth as much, so you can dance Tana instead if you like, or you can dance Amelia if you like, or you can dance Garrick if you like. You know, whatever example you want to use. She can make those units be better. You'll be able to use them more often. I don't like the idea that the dancer is the copy of your best units as much, because it's much more than that. But even if it was just that, it would be really good. If you replace Tethys with, what's another unit that has like roughly this rating? With Garrick, maybe not Garrick. What's like a unit that's like a 4 out of 5? With Arthur, for example. If you replace Tethys with Arthur, who is a 4 out of 5, most times your offense will be better with Tethys than with Arthur, because Tethys can dance a unit that's got better offense most of the time, I think. So that's Tethys for you. So 3.75, kind of surprising. But I guess, again, it's an average from websites. These websites I think are probably about accurately, and these just, I think they're wrong. Marissa, 1.75 out of 5 with 4 Ds and a bunch of growth changes, but they're all 5%, so who cares? Joshua, but even worse was what people had to say about her. One person said something to the effect of, if I were ranking her on personality, I'd give her triple S, but the only thing she's good at as a unit is dodging. And personal note, if I ranked people based on dodging, Marissa's avoid is not even that good at base until you train her. But yeah, they don't like sword lock units. I was surprised to see them just not like Marissa at all. I wonder if they're taking into account the fact that you have to raise her up, because they don't seem to do that for the trainees or for Lutz or for Naomi. So I wonder if they care about that for Marissa, or maybe they just really hate her low strength and durability, because those are still bad even if she was like roughly the same level as your other units. So I gotta wonder about that. But obviously I'm not going to disagree with this low rating. Is this worse than Garcia? She's at 1.75. Garcia was like 2 point something. Was he? No, Marissa is still higher. Marissa is a quarter of a point higher than Garcia. Okay, that's one way to rank units, I guess. La Rochelle, 3.75 out of 5. 2 Bs, a C, and an A. So roughly, basically exactly an average B. And she did get nerfed for English version by 10% magic and 5% speed, because clearly she was too good. While La Rochelle's high growth and excellent stats after leveling received praise, her relatively late recruitment as a level 3 staff bot cuts her score. Her recommended promotion is Valkyrie for its use of light magic. Sure, I don't think it matters a whole lot whether you go Valkyrie or Mage Knight, because La Rochelle's main purpose is staffing, but if you're not going to do a whole lot of offensive fighting, I guess light magic is better because it has defensive benefits, specifically weapon triangle over monsters. Anyway, mostly agree with the cons. They just don't care about them as much as I do, clearly, because my tier list has her at the bottom of E, below Gilliam, whereas they ranked her a full 1.25 points above Gilliam, for example. And that's a bit strange, but I get it. Again, if you're willing to grind like skirmishes and use the torch staff, or play the Tower of Volley and just heal someone over and over as they get hit by an entombed every time, then yeah, she's probably fine to level up, but it does take a lot of time. Also, like, it cuts her score is something that happened on, I want to say, like, one of these websites specifically, like the C and maybe the Bs, but these are still like pretty high scores for something with a drawback so severe, but I guess they find it unimportant. Dazla, this might be the lowest rating so far. Yeah, this is the same rating as Garcia, isn't it? Which makes fair sense, because Dazla is basically a berserker Garcia that's been trained. He has good HP and strength, but is lackluster everywhere else, is the mutual sentiment among the rankers. Yes, he does for his level, etc. But I mean, his performance at base requires no training whatsoever, so I think that's a little better than a unit that requires effort to become slightly better. But again, that's a different perspective, so I'm not going to harp on this too much. I get it. Dazla does feel very bad if you're expecting something like a trained Ross, I think. Saleh, general ranking is 2.75 out of 5 with 4 Cs, and he did lose a point of defense for the English release, which I get. A perfectly average pre-promote with staff utility, but it's agreed that Ewan far outdoes him, especially since Saleh's growths are pretty low all around. He is no Pent, was what 2 of the reviews said. That's funny, we just recorded the Pent the Saleh episode a couple days back, Raisins and me. And yeah, he's worse than Pent in quite a few areas. He's worse staff rank and worse stats all around. But I do think Saleh has relatively more availability and fits into FE8 a bit better than FE8 does, or than FE7 does, because the stabs, I think, well, it depends, because Pent on Hector Hard mode does a lot of staff utility, whereas with like restoring and barriering and stuff like that, where Saleh gets more utility out of warp and rescue, I want to say, compared to FE7, but it depends, I suppose. Yes, growths are bad, but again, if you rate units based on what you put in versus what you get out of it, Saleh is pretty good because you don't put any work into it and he's just good. And all he has to do is use the barrier staff every now and then to get the A rank stabs and then just be a good Pent, basically. But again, this is a difference in perspective, so I can't really talk about this too much. Clearly, they're more interested in long-term perspectives of someone like Ewan, who gets a 4.25 out of 5. And notably here is this is 3 Bs and an S rank. So the one S rank is doing a lot of work here. There was one website, an entire website of people that said Ewan is the best in the game, like several tiers above Saleh and La Rochelle. This is the same website, if I'm reading this right, that rated La Rochelle a C, Marissa a D, Tethys a C, put him on the same level as Garrick, and oh my gosh, that's insane. I really want to check out the sources now, but I don't read Japanese. Let me know if you want to check out the source and talk about it with me, because I'm super interested in what they have to say. It's probably about the same stuff that I get on my promotion recommendation guide every now and then. So 4.25 out of 5, and he did get nerfed in Magic a little bit, but again, this is only 10%. That is a lot more for trainees than it is for other units, because they get 10 extra levels, so it's like 1 extra point. That's not a lot, is it? Japanese fandom likes Yuan a lot more than the English fandom does. He gets score cuts with 3 of them for his late join time as a pupil, but they all agree he has good growth that turn him into a decent unit. The person who put him above even Amelia said that it's easier to keep him safe since, as a tome user, he has 2 range. They all generally agree that Yuan's the best when he goes down the Shaman line, since Archer and Lute can both cover the Sage route. So again, class by class, I already have a Sage, I don't have a Shaman yet, so we go Shaman with him. If Shaman was like horrible, had nothing to sell, like nothing to offer, then I don't really get why they would do that, but because Summoner exists, I'm going to forgive this. I don't know if they go Druid or Summoner with him. But yeah, don't really care about this here because it's not covered in the Japanese part. So what can I say about Yuan that I haven't really said about Amelia? Like, I think the bad start and the fact that how far he has to go to catch up to other units is so massive. Like, Yuan is getting one-shot by everything. There's probably some enemies that Amelia can survive at base, but Yuan just gets one-shot by everything except maybe Moguls when you unequip his Fire Tome or something. He is so easy to kill off by accident in the joining chapter. Especially in Ephraim route where things are a bit more hectic. Erica route, you can probably just slow down his joining chapter and train him there, or go to Tower of Falney. Either way. But yeah, I don't think trainings are that good. I don't think Yuan's like 2020 stats are that much better than everyone else. I'll admit all the Magic units in this game have flaws. Summoner is very fun though. I will agree, Summoner is fun. One thing I'm very glad not to see here is that they talk about, they don't mention that Yuan's summons are the worst, which is something I really don't care about. Summons always have 1 HP and 0 defense. That's all that matters about them. Yeah, Yuan time. Core Mag, 3.75 out of 5. 2 Bs, an A, and a C. And this is a unit that has significant changes in Erica route, as you might know. He kind of looks like a unit that either got harbor bonuses or just leveled up automatically too many times. Because he joins to the higher level in Erica route than Ephraim route. And I think in the English version, the bases are roughly the same. But at least he got overcompensated in Erica route. And they did... I think they thought that was an oversight and they fixed it for the English version. So that's why he has like significantly like 5 less HP, 3 less strength, 2 less speed, and 2 less defense. Like pretty big changes here. Despite being stronger in literally every stat in the Japanese version of Erica routes, which most of these rankings were based on, Cormac doesn't get particularly outstanding ratings. Most of the concern went to his low speed, lock defense, and rest growth. However, his basis and high HP strength gains him favor as a low investment unit. I get it, but I still feel like there's too much emphasis on the growth here. Like his base defense is 15 in the Japanese version of Erica route. That's so high. That's higher than most units in the game. But because they stared at their growths, which I think from the top of my head, Cormac's defense growth is like 20 or 25%. Just look at the overall picture. Just look at the average stats, really. That's all you need to know to figure out that Cormac has his good bases. You know, I'm not even super mad at a 3.75. I just think the emphasis here is a bit weird. Because like low speed growth, it's like 40%, bro. And he doubles at base against most mid-speed enemies, I want to say. And also, they don't talk about how good he is on Ephraim route, too. Like, yeah, he has worse bases there, but he also joins a full, like, 4 maps earlier, basically. He joins in Chapter 10. Well, really, he joins in Yeah, he has utility in Chapter 10 in Ephraim. So 10, 11, 12, and then 13. Because he joins very late in 13 Erica, so he's 4 extra chapters. But I don't think they really factor in availability, which I think doesn't really work for rankings. I think you have to factor in availability. And I have another video about that, too, if you're interested. Why availability matters. Anyway. Renak. Again, big changes to his bases that we should definitely matter here, or that we definitely should discuss. I don't think they're that big. The biggest changes to res, which barely matters for a unit that can't even counter at range. Like, sure, he got 8 points of res. How much are we using that really? 2 points of HP. I guess the total res bulk can matter. And then he gained a bunch of skill, so he has better hit, I guess. Slightly better growth, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But the general ranking is 1.5 out of 5. 3 Ds and an E. Renak sorely needed those buffs to become a barely viable combat unit in versions where the enemies were nerfed. Its only redeeming factor is his thief utility. In fact, one reviewer wrote, Renak's usability is directly tied to Calm's survival. Another wrote, as long as Calm is alive, Renak's existential value is gone. I think it's the reverse, because they think of Colm as not as a non-combat unit, right? They wrote that. They said that before. Is it like somewhere up here? Let me re-show that. Colm is viewed as a non-combatant, is the summary here. And I don't know how accurate the summary is, but if that's what they say, but if that's what they all say, that Colm is a non-combat unit, they don't train Colm then, right? So Colm is his base level. Even with these like massively nerfed stats compared to our Renak, or pre-buff stats technically, you know, this is still better than base level Colm by a fair amount. Like 15 speed is way more than Colm has at base, where he has 12. So I don't really know why they care so much. Plus, there's not a lot of maps where you need 2 thieves. So generally, you're just going to use Renak over Colm when he joins, right? I guess if you never use thieves for combat, you don't really care about their stats. But if you're only going to deploy one, you might as well deploy the one with the better stats, just in case something unexpected happens, I think. And plus, you don't have to use a promotion item on Colm. And Renak doesn't need to use lockpicks in that case. So, I don't know. I think Renak is better than in that case. Or better for the time when they're both around. I don't disagree with like the 1.5. The one thing I find Renak useful for at that point in the game is digging up desert items. That's it. Dussel, 2 out of 5 with a very short line of text here. 2 C's, an E, and a D. So one website says Dussel, one of the worst units in the game. And I can tell you this is not because they can use silver swords in the English version and they can't do it there. The silver swords will not make the difference here, I can tell you that much. With relatively low bases at a high promoted level, Dussel doesn't get as much utility, though one reviewer does cite his usefulness in the ghost ship chapter. At least they discovered that life hack. This is an insane rating. I forgot about this one, about how insane this is. How can you deploy Dussel and not see how good he is? This is outrageous. This is insane. It's probably because of the high level. They put expectations on a unit based on what they are, what class they are, and what level they're at. They see Dussel in like chapter 10 as level 10 promoted. They're like, well, he must be really, really, really good for him to be this high level. And then he fails to one enemy. They're like, oh, trash, absolute trash. Probably that's the only explanation I can find. They think of units as like investment projects rather than looking at how a unit does right now and how much that helps them. So they see Dussel grow like 5 XP per kill. They're like, wow, this is gonna take forever to raise. Oh my god, that takes forever. But he's really just way ahead on levels. He needs less XP than most units. It's like the Seth problem all over again. So yeah, I would raise Dussel like a 4 out of 5 personally for casual play because of how much easier he makes the chapters that he's in. Maybe they mostly play Erica routes. That doesn't get mentioned though. I don't know how I can see Dussel as this bad. Again, it kind of reminds me of those IGN GameFAQs guides back in the day that would also kind of harp on promotes for not being as good as they want them to be for some reason. And they would rate Dussel as low because his averages are not as good as like Kyle or Ford or Franz as a high-level Great Knight. Which, I mean, Dussel is there as a Great Knight way earlier and has better defense probably still. Like, Dussel is just there. But again, I don't really care about investment costs, so that's a big draw to Dussel, I think, is no investment cost. Null, I like this rating, 2.25 out of 5. I have him pretty low at like D, like between Inez and Cyrene and below Garcia. Just give up on his defense and luck, one person wrote. The general consensus is that he should only be bothered with if Ewan didn't grow well. Summoner is of course a recommended promotion. So they like Summoner. That's good. Summoners are busted. 2 C's and 2 D's. Not super surprised. I thought there would be more emphasis on his combat, and they just don't like the fact that he can get one-runed by things, because that's what they harped on for like Mulder, and even Ardor got a lot of crap for that, for low defense and luck. And they're like, yeah, just give up on it, which I don't know if that means don't use him for combat, or just keep him out of range at all times, or just summon things. But I mean, Summoner is good, and just how much you value it depends on how much you value viability. Honestly, or availability, I thought they would value him lower because he joined so late. He's not a good growth project. Like, he's not a unit you can train up and make him good late game. I thought every mention of him being like bad at using Gleipnir because Gleipnir is not monster effective, I thought that would be mentioned at least, but they didn't. Or the fact that he's like the only shaman you get if you didn't train Ewan. But I guess since they value Ewan so highly, they think there's not really a niche for him that you don't already have, because they wrote this. Maybe that's it. Myrrh, I also expect it to be way higher because they like growth, right? But it's 2 C's and 2 B's. While Myr is praised for her high growth and Dragonstone buffs, she gets some flack for her late join time and weakness to bows, even though she has 50 Dragonstone uses, increased from Fa's 30 Dragonvine Stone users. Yeah, that's the comparison for FE6 that you knew was coming. I thought they would complain that it was not enough uses, 50 Dragonstone uses. I thought they would, you know, praise her a bit more, but this is where they suddenly get into late join time a little bit, which I don't really understand, because clearly that's not a big issue for the mid-game joining units, but again, I guess the late game is just too late, I guess. I don't know. I think Myr is very, very good for playthroughs. Like, if you're just playing the game, I just find myself coming off of, like, every time I'm done with the game, I'm like, wow, Myr is so good, because the late game bosses for FE8 are such a pain, and Myr just wrecks like 2 or 3 of them, depending on how she's grown and what your strategy is. I'm not going to get into detail here, but I think if you played FE8, you know what I mean. Like, suddenly, the enemies are still easy to kill, but the bosses are just so strong. Like, the last 3 are just such a pain in the ass to even survive for a lot of units, and Myr just does it. Not at base, but raising her is so easy. She's the easiest to train on a leveled unit in this series, probably. Weaknesses bows. I mean, if you want your Philly shields to be on Tana, I guess, but if you don't, for some reason, they just give it to Myr, and she just tinks all the bows. And if she's doing a lot of work, then I don't see why you wouldn't do that. But yeah, I thought they would rate her more favorably. Plus, I think they like Fa a lot. I haven't seen their FE6 ratings, if they have them. Again, let me know if you have them somewhere. But yeah, surprising. I thought they'd be higher for sure, because her growth are so good. Cyrene, general ranking 1.5 out of 5, 3 Ds and an E, and she did get slightly buff strength growth. That doesn't matter because Cyrene probably levels up 1 time in everyone's playthrough, at most. And they did change her bases a lot though. Like, these are some massive buffs. You know, they'd be more impactful on a unit that joins earlier, for sure, but imagine how bad she must be in Japanese at base. Like, it's insane. Remember, the left number is in Japanese, so 10 base strength in chapter 17, 8 base defense in chapter 17, and she's like, what, 28 HP or something? She's insanely bad. Combat wise anyway. I still think she has some utility, but I don't blame anyone for giving her 1.5. Let's see what they say. For the same reasons as English tier lists, Cyrene is ranked low for her late join time, bad bases, and growths that won't let her catch up. Yeah, her growths are good, but you know, it's hard to level her up. She's like a level 1 Falcon Knight. Anyway, that's the whole blog. As you can see, they emphasize late game, or they emphasize growth and caps sometimes. They emphasize what class a unit is, and if there's other units in that same class that do better. They don't really care that much about utility at base. They don't really care about turn saves or mounts or efficiency or anything like that, which, again, I'm fine with going on that. But even within those standards, I think there are some inconsistencies here that I disagree with. I don't really want cookies. Get out of here. So overall, I think this is a strange collection. And again, remember, this is not one person rating all these units. This is 4 websites with, I think, a bunch of different people rating all these units. So I'm very surprised to see this. And this is, a lot of the arguments I see are in common, like have common ground with arguments I've seen in the past in the English community. And I think they're generally accepted as wrong here. So I'm curious if there's Japanese Fire Emblem YouTubers that do the same thing I do, where they analyze the game in a different way and they come to different conclusions, or if they all just think roughly like this. Because I'm very surprised. And again, I'm not making this to shit on the Japanese Fire Emblem community, because I think it's wonderful to see the differences in how they think. And even though I do heavily disagree with it, I don't want to do it in a disrespectful way. So just getting that out of the way one last time. Everyone is free to play the game how they want. Everyone is free to rate units as they want. You can make your own tier lists, everything. Nothing I say is going to stop you, and I don't expect it to, and I don't want it to. Everyone do what you want to do. Have fun. Play the game you want to play. But I do really, really disagree with you, and sometimes I just don't understand you. And that's what I'm trying to do, is understand where you're coming from. That's it for today. Next time, I want to show you the FE7 one, which is even more interesting in some ways. Let me know what you thought of this video. It's a bit different than what I usually do, but I thought it'd make for a good Sunday video. So I'll see you all around. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye. Peace, peace.